See, when America was at its worst, it was never the government that fixed us. The government can never fix us. It's the people. It's the resiliency. It's the spirit of America, the American spirit that drives us. And despite all obstacles, we are optimists. We will win at all costs. That's what Jeremy Glick said. Jeremy Glick, the guy that was on the plane that went down over Pennsylvania, you remember what he said? The terrorists were on that plane, and they knew there was no way out. Jeremy gets up, he gathers a bunch of people together. They said, we got to do something. We're all going to die, but we still have to do something. We have to save probably thousands of people's lives, maybe millions of people. And they got together, this group of people, to do something when death was their ultimate option. That was all they had. But even with that, a group of people led by Jeremy Glick, you know what he said? He said, ladies and gentlemen, let's roll. Talk about sacrifice. Phenomenal. You have no idea the power that you have inside of you. It is amazing. See, when I thought about starting my career and doing this thing, I was scared. Just like sometimes we wonder, can we really make it? I didn't know, but I did it anyway with the help of some great mentors. And I remember going back and looking at Miss Ritchie, and I said, you know what? I've got to go back and thank this woman. I got to go back and thank the person who inspired me. So I started looking for her. And you know what? It was hard. For the first 6 months, I couldn't even find her, didn't know where she was. And I finally got her number, and I remember that I got her number. And I remember I made this telephone call. And the phone's ringing, and her husband picks up and says, hello. I said, yes, sir. I said, my name is Mark Anthony Garrett. I'm looking for Betty Jean Ritchie, Kitty Hawk Elementary School, 1977. Is this her residence? He says, yes, sir. And who may this be? I said, well, sir, my name is Mark Anthony Garrett. I'm an old student of hers, and I just want to know, is she there? Because I wasn't sure if she had passed or what. And he says, yeah, she's here. I says, well, sir, could you do me a favor? He says, anything. I says, could you put her on the phone, but don't tell her it's me. I want to surprise her. She really helped my life, and I just want to tell her how much I appreciate her. He starts giggling, and so he says, Jean. She says, yes. Some guy's on the phone for you. And she says, well, who is it? He says, I don't know, some guy selling carpet. Get on the phone, right? So she gets on the phone, and she says, hello. Now, you got to understand, ladies and gentlemen, my heart is boom, 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 beating and beating and beating. I'm just scared to death, and I just start talking. I said, Miss Ritchie, Miss Ritchie, you may not remember me, but I went to Kitty Hawk Elementary School in 1977. I was, and as soon as I said I was, you know what she says? She says, Mark Anthony Garrett. She says, how are you, son? And I'm like, oh my God. It's a spiritual moment. I just couldn't believe it. And I kind of paused for a minute, and I says, Miss Ritchie, yeah, it's me. It's Mark. How you doing? She says, I'm fine. I says, well, Miss Ritchie, I haven't seen you in so long. How did you know it was me? And she says, well, Mark, I have caller ID. So, you know, it's like, total caller ID with your name on it. Yeah, that makes sense, right? So, okay, I can live with that. Great, right? So we start talking. I'm like, Miss Ritchie, you know, I just want to let you know I'm a professional speaker. Blah, 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 blah. So I'm going a mile a minute. She says, Mark. She says, calm down. She says, why don't you come and see me? And I said, okay. So we talked a little bit, and we set up the date. And I pull up to her house, and, you know, and it was before this video was shot. And I'm in my car, and I'm trying to rehearse. What am I going to say? What do you say to the person who saved your life? What do you say to the person who saw enough in you to tell you that you can make it? What do you say? So I'm starting rehearsing the speech, and Miss Ritchie, you're my inspiration. No, Miss Ritchie, you're my great, you know, and a voice says, just get out the car and just go. Just go. So I got out the car, and I went up to the house. I knocked on her door, and she opened the door. She had this big smile on her face. And she's looking at me, and all she says was, I see that you kept your chin up. How you doing, son? And I remember grabbing her and I hugged her and I just didn't want to let go. And we sat in her house and we talked for hours. We talked about life. We talked about purpose. We talked about her teaching. And after a while, she starts crying, so I get emotional and I start crying. She had this little toy poodle. It's crying, so everything in the house is just bawling, right? And so we're talking, and pretty soon it's time for me to go. And I get up to leave, and she says, Mark, she says, I have something I want to tell you. I said, yes, ma'am. She says, I wasn't supposed to be at school that day. I was supposed to take my daughter to the doctor, but somehow my husband decided he was going to do it, which is unusual. And she says, when I was going to school that day, I found it very strange that had happened because my husband never does that. He was a superintendent. He didn't have the time, but for some reason, he did it that morning. And he says, I go into my classroom and I'm doing a lesson plan and something tells me to get up and go to the office. And she thought that to be very strange, and so she kind of sits there a little bit more, and voice comes again and says, get up and go to the office. So she gets up and she goes to the office, and she says, when I turned the corner, I saw you and your dad walking up. Your dad was holding your hand, and I saw you. And she says, when I saw you, something says, you need to connect with him. She says, I didn't know what it was. I was kind of spooked out by it. All I knew is I had to answer the call. And she says, I came and I introduced myself, and that's how I met you. And she says, you had something special. I didn't know what it was. I just knew that I had to be a part of your life. And she says, Mark, always trust your intuition. Always trust that gut feeling, that thing that will tell you what's right